they still have the room to catch up and to make the necessary amends.
Yes, I have to say on that note, I mean, Amora is going to come in a minute, but I have to say I was really impressed with the vigilance of ordinary people who seem determined to, to see the process through. I mean, I saw after voting in many places, people staying back and, to observe the counting and to ensure that the results are uploaded. And they were very emphatic.
Yeah, that has been there for some time, because if you go back like 3 electoral cycles, the idea of protecting your vote has been there for some time now, because people know that it's not just about voting, it's about the counting of the votes, and especially now where technology has been introduced to improve the process. So it's not just that you vote, you wait until the votes are counted, and the votes are now transmitted live. So because, there could also be some issues or some hanky-panky between the polling units and the collation center. So technology, the room for mischief has been
minimized, if not totally eliminated.
Yeah, of course. With human beings, there will always be the human element. And that's why there's also the room for seeking redress. People will always be people. But, whatever it is that is decided at the polling unit, at the collation center, and even when ANEC announces the result, that is why there's a room for for those who feel aggrieved, to seek redress, and you now get the courts to look into it.
Indeed, it's a process that doesn't end until a winner is declared, right? And in that process, there are lots of people, stakeholders involved in the chain, and it looked like even Mother Nature came into play a role today.
Yeah, I noticed it rained today, which is quite extraordinary.
Indeed,
really,
in Delta States, we heard from Jemima Boloko, the rain, disrupting. In the Federal Capital Territory, Abuja, where we are, the rain also played a role. But let's talk about the police security, which should have also played a role in these elections today. Yeah. How would you rate security? That's important for the elections.
Well, let me admit that I'm based in Abuja, so I can only speak, to what I've seen. On my way to my polling unit, I met like 2, roadblocks by the police on the way, and they say, what's up? And I told them I was going to vote. I showed them my PVC, and they looked at it and they waved me on. So
so you drove?
Yes, yeah, I drove. Right. I drove to the to my polling unit. And when you get to the polling area, you also see some security, some police presence there. And by the way, the one for the Gates Village is also in front of a police station, right? But this is something that is also very important. We have 176,846 polling units. Our entire police force, I don't think it's more than 250,000, right? So you can't have even 2 police officers in one polling unit. So it's always going to be tough. Of course, there are also security forces that are supposed to back up the police. Yeah. But the police is the lead agency in this instance. But by and large, I think the performance that I've seen in Abuja, it's good enough. Also, since they can't be everywhere, and because of the number, they can also be overwhelmed. What would be very important is not to have police, a substantial presence of policemen in each polling unit, but the opportunity for rapid response. So if there's an incident, the key. If there's an incident in a particular place,
absolutely,
how long does it take?
Absolutely,
for them to respond when there's a distress call. So that is very important. And I think in some places, even in Lagos, where I think there was a particular place in a part of Lagos, things were disrupted, but eventually order was restored.
But I mean, we saw the fact that people they called hoodlums in Nigeria. I mean, they were making off with Beaver's equipment in some parts of the place, and beyond just being generally disruptive. I mean, what's the idea behind that? What are they going to do with the Beavers?
Well, you see, the thing is that based on the process we're using now, you can't be accredited without a Beavers machine. And the Beavers machines are polling unit specific. Right. That is what I think, right? So people try to play games, So if you think, for instance, that you are not going to win a particular place, so it's one of the devices of vote repression, right? But, there will be stuff like that. The most important thing is that how does the police respond? How does INEC respond, right? So I don't think, and also let's bear in mind, if Beaver's machines were snatched, I don't think that happened in majority of cases. That's just a few. And I want to believe that we have a backup situation, a backup arrangement where if something goes wrong, either it's snatched, it malfunctions, or something happens, they should be able to, respond quickly. So things will always happen. In this kind of stuff, is a huge logistic enterprise, right? And assume that things will always go wrong. So, but when things go wrong, what do? That is what will be key.
Well, the INEC chairman did.
Raring to go. You let us know what your experience has been today. Did you brave the sun? Because the temperatures were high and sweltering today. I don't know what it was like where you were, but much later here in the Federal Capital Territory, rain from nowhere, with a mighty breeze coming to calm the temperatures here in the FCT. I do not know what it was like, or what it's been like elsewhere, but I've since also the tension and the frustration that quite a number of people seem to have experienced today, Nyota.
Frustrations or not, the atmosphere out there was really exciting. There was this sense of anticipation, and everybody was just looking forward to the outcome. And the truth is, where I went to a couple of polling units when I left the studio.
Did you go to vote?
I actually went to vote.
Well, yes, I think 40 polling units, which is quite substantial. That's about, if you're talking about 140, you said you had 141.
I thought I had that.
The correspondent said, 40 out of 141. Whatever it is substantial enough. I think INEC would notify them about, okay, we need to have fresh election in these places. The only problem will be where a few people have voted. Would they need to vote again? How are you going to secure, the ballots that have been cast? The other thing also is that, if, like in my polling unit, more than 1,500 people turn up today. Let's say, for instance, hypothetically, let's say they cancel that. Can you guarantee that the same number of people will turn up tomorrow? So that those are issues. But definitely there will be hiccups. And by the way, we also need to acknowledge this. In previous electoral cycles, we've had situations where elections were postponed, days to the election, and sometimes even hours to the commencement of the election. In this particular year, we haven't seen that. So that we should give a thumbs up to INEC on that. But we shouldn't give them a total pass, right? Yes, they've come up against some challenges, including the elements. Who would have thought that they would rain Abuja today, right? But like I keep saying, is that things will happen. How you respond is the retest of your preparedness. Yeah.
Waziri, thank you very much indeed. And I hope you'll be able to get to vote, because obviously that's really the bottom line, isn't it?
I hope the process, of course, in your own polling units where you voted, if you did, we'd like to hear from you and be a part of all of that. Don't forget, you can see our social media handles where we wait to get your unique experience. We also did have Nigerians who are living outside this country also watching keenly, and many of them have contacted us. And then we'll have our correspondents who will be bringing you a lot of field reports from all of them, most of them. In fact, you have heard quite a number. But here in the studios, we've got some lady and gentlemen joining us. Before then, yes.
Yeah, ahead. Just quickly, just for those who might not be able to see what is on the screen, and I know that we'll be talking much later about that particular community, people with disabilities, who might not be able to read what is on the screen for their advantage or for their information. The handle to use is 2023 verdict at channelstv.com. 2023 verdict at channelstv.com. We're waiting to hear from you. What was your experience? Were you able to vote? If you weren't, let us know.
Insist that that agenda is complete.
Through your structure.
Yeah, through your structures. If you look at the university system, it's a system that should tell us what a democracy should be. I mean, you sit JAMB, you sit post-UME, you get into the university. University has admitted you have an admission letter.
Having been in the build-up in different capacities ahead of the general elections, the first batch of which is going on in some areas already done for a lot of people who have already voted. On my immediate right, Abosede Alimi is an area analyst. She's also founder, Will being Women in Leadership Advancement Network. Glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Right beside her is Husseini Abdu, the chair of the board of YAGA. He's also country director, CARE International. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And then we also do have joining us virtually, Fidelis Allen. He's an ERAD analyst. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Allen.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, so let's start off here with you, Abosede. I haven't seen all of this. I know different strokes for different folks. It rained in Abuja, if not everywhere in Abuja. Some of the areas was sunny, and then many thought, oh dear, what a day it's been. But then, what was your experience for today?
So, I mean, today has been a mixed bag, as we've been hearing. But I think, like you said earlier, the excitement is palpable. The determination of citizens is impressive, right? People are sharing data. People are, sitting and waiting where the BVAS was not working. I mean, I think that the sheer determination of Nigerians to exercise their right to vote is something that we should be very, very proud of. But I think on the other hand, unfortunately, voting starting late and all the other things that we're beginning to hear about violence in different areas is definitely not what we had hoped for. But I think it's important to note that Nigeria is a huge country, right? And these are isolated cases. But I think it's very important that elections are happening. There's so much support when it comes to incidents, right? So that, you're here where, civil society has a whole infrastructure. So whether you like it or not, if you also wanted to report an incident, if you wanted to check fake news, the infrastructure and the support ecosystem that exists is one that's also very impressive for citizens to believe that their vote will actually count and that this is the election, as many have come to believe, that will make a difference in their lives.
Mr. Abdu is one of the CSOs which you refer to, having that huge infrastructure to see, keeping and monitoring what's playing itself out. But Mr. Abdu, I know everybody's looking towards that result. They just want to know what is going on. What can anybody tell us? Can anybody give us a sneak peek into what to expect? So does that define your experience, or better yet, what is your experience?
I think it did define my experience. It's been quite an interesting day for a lot of people. I knew even up to yesterday morning, there are some who still feel, would this election hold? That was the kind of question. Because people have seen in the last two succeeding elections been postponed on the wee, at a very wee hour, and so people still were asking. So this morning when everything came up, I think the excitement was quite there, very palpable, particularly in Abuja here. We saw that. Of course, the number wasn't looking as higher. We don't have the total figures for now, but the numbers weren't looking as higher as we had actually expected in some of the polling units around Abuja in particular. But reports coming up from different locations actually shows that level of excitement. The major challenge is the same traditional logistic issues that INEC has historically struggled with. And in my opinion, I actually think it's a struggle that will just not go away. It wouldn't go away because, one, the size of the country, and two, the burden of actually managing elections. 90 million plus people across 36 states on the same day. It's not done.
That is, it's going to be tough because, I mean, someone was telling me just before the show began saying, look, no matter how much effort INEC and everybody puts into this, if we don't address this logistic question, we'll always have a huge challenge.
Yeah,
now you say it won't go away.
Yeah, I actually think that we are not discussing it enough. We're not having the right conversation around it. Nigeria is a federation. The basic principle of a federal system is complementarity. We don't trust the state. Ordinarily, state electoral commission should be supporting this process. And that's like in major, bigger, functional federations. But Nigeria's electoral commission are just useless. Rightly so, to some extent, if you look at how local government elections are managed. The second part of it is the depth of secrecy surrounding our elections, the whole level of protection that goes with it. That you don't look, ballot papers are printed as if you are printing currency or money. So it's such a big thing. So essential or sensitive materials never gets out until the night before the election. It just doesn't work anywhere. So we need to lessen, we need to simplify. We need to reduce the whole security thing around elections and take a breath and say, look, this is just a day thing. We can do it in a very simple manner. I don't have the details of that, but Nigeria do need to simplify elections, and that's the only way we can deal with this.
But all right, so one of the areas where this challenge read its head is in Mafoluku, Oshodi, where our correspondent did bring us some footage concerning what transpired over there. There are several people who reported voting, which they interpret as voter suppression on their part. So that happened in Mafoluku area of Lagos, and so it was one of the other areas where you had this skirmish, which several people just wanted and wished they could go away. So if we could just have that, those images of footage just come through, where our correspondent Olu Phillips did bring us that report concerning how that played out.
They carried everything right now. Everything. They carried everything at one time. They came with Korokwe and this thing. They carried everything. Look at now. They carried all our police units. Yeah. They carried everything now.
This is actually
and there were a number of reports that came through for Surulere as well, in terms of the ugly incident that went through. It was in the same area that we had reports of military men also coming through. So, okay, there you go. So, so different areas in Lagos that did experience this one.
Well, sometimes when you do see visuals of violence in one area, it might look similar to another area, but
and the officials are the same.
They confirm it, yes, indeed, and the materials used are essentially the same. That's the INEC box, which is very similar to what I saw here in Abuja today. Okay. And also we see a table, a regular table, which you will normally see. The polling booth is right there. It's a scene that is not a very pleasant one to see, because you can see that people are standing a distance away and they're looking dissatisfied. You can see ballot boxes on the floor. The ballot papers torn apart in different areas, and it ought not to be so. It does look like voting, the process has been disrupted. But let me quickly take you up. I mean, while those visuals are still playing, and I know that that is not the only place where we saw pictures like this, especially in Lagos. Yaga had done a report. I think they had come up with an election manipulation index report, which we had seen just before the polls. I think that was released sometime in January. And it talked about the propensity to manipulation of polling and elections in some states across the federation. There were a number of variables listed in those in that particular report. One of it was election fraud, voter suppression. We've seen, and Lagos was listed with at least 5 of those variables. So no surprise coming from some of the pictures that we're seeing here. Let me come to you. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much. So absolutely, so Yaga had published an election manipulation risk index. Yeah. And, I think that's one of the things that's really important when organizations like that do important work like that, because to your point, a lot of the states that we've seen today, so Katsina, Rivers, Lagos, were already identified as high-risk areas for voter suppression, as you mentioned, electoral fraud. I think there was not as much report on vote buying. Thank God, because that was
that place for 10 years. You've left now, of course, but these things must have occurred over and over again.
Yeah, they've been occurring over and over again because of the level of suspicion in the country's polity. If INEC was allowed to use a lot more vehicles, the government agencies like the transport associations, where we have larger vehicles, like the OMTCO vehicles in Abuja can actually deliver up to 10 polling units at the time. That could do well, but because of the level of suspicion in the country, they are forced to use the NURT drivers, which sometimes do not have enough vehicles. When you do the logistics, there's 170,000 polling units with an average of 4 staff. If you do the numbers, you'll find that the sheer number of vehicles required over the country are so many that definitely they cannot be delivered in most of the states.
And Dr.
And there's been an incident here. We understand eyewitness here tell us, especially the people living here, tell us that some young men came in a bike, opened fire, shots were fired, and everybody scampered for safety. While that happened, they picked up the ballot boxes, picked up electoral materials, and burnt them. And you can see the ashes of papers, electoral papers and registers, and you can see that these ones are burnt. And that's the situation. It tells you that this was an active ward because you can see names on the wall. But what that means is that as far as this ward is concerned, EC 330A, I don't know how INEC is going to deal with the issues of those who have voted, whose votes will not count as a result of the ballot box being taken and burnt. This is the situation. And there's another one over there. As you can see, there's another polling unit which is just less than 50 meters away from it. Just less than 50 meters away from it, you can see another ballot, another activity going on here in terms of arson. I mean, this is clearly an arson. This is material that has been burnt and shredded, you can see. And that's the situation we have coming from. And you see this is an INEC signed documentation with an INEC officer's signature. It shows you that this was an active paper for today. And some guys have come here to set federal government's property, disenfranchising people, and making sure that all that the government have been campaigning in terms of activities against such acts have been perpetrated. And it is the hope that the INEC chairman, the head of the security unit, will take this very seriously and bring these people. It's not difficult to know who these guys are, and bring them to book and make sure that those who have been denied the right to vote can have some level of respite.
Citizen journalism has been very helpful during this election. I mean, apart from we reporting from the mainstream media and news organizations, you could pick up your phone. A lot of people were sending videos live from where they were. They were reporting themselves, telling you when they arrived, telling you where they were in the queue. I knew people who went by 6:30 a.m. By 4:30 p.m. was when they were able to vote because the voting did not start early. So we're hoping that after this election, we should not be seeing this again. But as you can see, we have news reports, not only from reporters, but from the citizens. And this is very useful in order to understand what is going on in different parts of the country.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Ikoku there. And Amina Zakari, you heard some of that. I mean, as we said, not to put you on the spot, but you were at INEC, so you can give us kind of the inside track on what goes on there. How would you react to some of the things that Dr. Ikoku just said?
Well, some of them are really not excusable, like starting an election well after 12, because INEC has, since 2011, has designed what we call racks,
infringe on the voting area, and also not to militarize the whole process. Basically, it was well secured for Mr. President to come out and cast his ballot. He was accompanied by his wife, members of his family, and also personal assistants and domestic staff of Mr. President. He ensured all of them registered to vote here in Daura so that they would not be disenfranchised, because they are always on duty around Mr. President. So coming to work with Mr. President, traveling to Mr. President to Daura, did not mean that they will be disenfranchised. They all followed him to the polling unit after Mr. President cast his own vote. All of them, one after the other, also were able to cast their vote. So it's so far we've not had any serious incident that security agencies had to respond to. Everything has been under control. Nothing has been overwhelming for security agencies here in Katsina.
Well, thank you very much, Femi Akonde, for that roundup. You know, thanks again.
State, we should be able to come clean and tell people that your ballot papers are not available for tomorrow's election. Maybe you carry on to Sunday, or you may start your election late because your ballot papers are coming later. All these things can be done. There's enough technology in the system and in the situation room of INEC to be able to track and give information on these incidences.
Indeed, and just to say that there's nowhere in the world where you have 100% perfect elections. But like you said, some of these logistical challenges we've seen today are inexcusable. But we cannot also say we've had an election without it being inclusive. And Anna Zachary, I want to ask you this question because we do understand you've been working with people with disabilities. And I wonder what you noticed today during the exercise, the elections. How inclusive would you say this election was where you monitored?
Well, I represented the Albino Foundation, Africa. I came to the situation room. The Albino Foundation has been working assiduously to ensure there's data for persons with disability, and INEC has...
Adamawa State, he is keeping tracks with what is going on. He did report how the presidential candidate of the PDP voted. He was also supposed to give a press release to address the media today, but I'm not sure what's going on with that because it seemed to have been moved. Hello, Emperor. Tell us what is going on where you are at the moment. Yeah, Emperor, we can't hear you here, but if you can you hear us at the moment? Okay, so that is not coming through yet. We'll fix that connection and get him to speak to us. So he is in Yola, so he'll be giving us how things have turned out. Well, yeah.
Very interesting scenario we've seen play out in many of the states that we've monitored today. It looked like it was pretty seamless for the presidential candidates to cast their votes. Thankfully, we didn't see any incidents like we saw in 2015 when the smart card reader could not read the fingerprint of then presidential candidate Goodluck Jonathan. So we did see that. I mean, no surprises there, or were there any?
No, I don't think there were any surprises. I think the system we use, the beavers are actually much more higher in terms of the grading and its capacity, its operational capacity, than what we used to have. I think the beavers emerge as a lesson learning from the previous systems we used. So it was really, really good that we had that.
I think we do have our correspondent Emperor, so he can go ahead and give us his updates on what is going on where he is. Emperor, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chamberlain. It's still quite full. I mean, a handful of activities here in Yola, the Adamawa State capital, where we have been monitoring the voting process, you know, here in the state. Of course, we know that one of the major contestants in the election is from Adamawa State. But what we saw during the day was the fact that residents turned out in their large number to exercise their civic responsibility, and there was no any security issue reported in the course of the election, except, of course, maybe in areas that we couldn't cover. But again, we saw that in terms of the deployment of personnel to various polling units, that went each free, and election held across the over 4,000 polling units here in Adamawa State. I have the Commissioner of Police here in Adamawa State in person of CP Baba Tola Afolabi, who will give us a rundown of what went on in terms of the security situation. Good evening, CP.
Good evening.
Yeah, just to give us what's transpired today in Adamawa State in terms of the security situation. Were there areas where we recorded electoral violence?
To the glory of God, we didn't record any electoral violence due to the security measures we placed on ground in conjunction with other sister agencies.
But we understand that the Northeast region is one of those, one of the states that have come under serious security threats in recent time. Where did that in a way show up? Even though you said the election went successfully, but were there areas that you received report? Tell us what the report looks like from across the 21 local government areas of Adamawa State.
Across the 21 local government, there was no advice report because all the security personnel performed their duty credibly well. So far, no problem.
Citizens didn't have cause to worry?
Nobody had any cause to worry. So everybody went to the polling units, cast their vote, then returned home safely.
Were there any case of perhaps attack on your personnel?
There wasn't any.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's CP Tola Afolabi. But we also have the man who is in charge of the job here in Adamawa State. That's the resident electoral commissioner, Mr. Udu Yunusa, who would also give us a rundown of what transpired in the course of the day. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. Give us a picture of how it went in terms of election here in Adamawa State.
Okay, election started by 8 o'clock, and there was a very good turnout. People turn out en masse. We toured about 4 areas of the state. Me and the commissioner of police, and of course the service chief of the state. We were there. People were enthusiastic to carry out their vote, and very good. We traveled as far as Fufure, where up to the time of closing the elections, people were queuing. Over 1,000 people were there. And we say, since they already entered the queue, they should be able to conduct the election, to be allowed to finish. And I can say it's 100% success. There was no any incident of any breach of the peace, and people were very, very happy up to the time we left.
Earlier on, when we had Mr. Atiku Abubakar vote in his polling unit, he did mention the fact that he had a challenge being captured, by the Beavers machine. That's in terms of the use of his finger print. Were there areas like that where you recorded such challenges, malfunction of Beavers machines, and how were you able to handle those challenges?
Using of Beavers we used it successfully in Adamawa State. There were no challenge, and in fact, people were very happy because it eases their time to make the time they take to make the elections. And people were very, very enthusiastic. Yes. And there's no, I cannot recall any breach of the peace or somebody trying to truncate the election in any way. It's all through.
So we are here at the election center. Give us a sense of what we should be expecting any moment soon.
We have very far reaching areas like the Madagali, Mubi. These are areas very in the extreme end, and of course we have a very difficult terrain. And we have to, even within the metropolis, people are now counting. So it is only when those nearby they come, then we're going to make announcement on what has happened. So
to people, I went around to some polling units, and there were a lot of people queuing and waiting patiently. I mean, from morning till evening, people are still waiting to vote. So I think that during this election, Nigerians want to send an incredibly powerful message that, you know what, we are tired, we really want to do something different. Whoever wins in this election, I think that they will be sending the message that we either want to go forward or we want to go backwards. So I think that at the end of the day, by the time the votes are tallied and the numbers start coming out, we might see that there has been a high number of turnout across the country. And that is very good for Nigeria. That is really good for Nigeria, because it begins to tell politicians that you can no longer do what you used to do. I think this election will be a teachable moment for many politicians and for a lot of leaders in our country. It's going to say you can no longer be abrasive. You can no longer get a position and do whatever you like and go away with it and get away with it. People are going to be asking the questions. People are going to want to hold you accountable for whatever position you hold. So we're hoping to see that this election is a turnaround from the past. We're waiting for results to come in.
Right, and Dr. Amina Zakari, I don't know if you've become a doctor quite yet, but if you are, then I certainly wouldn't have any problems with calling you one. But I mean, we've got a couple of minutes left before we have to end the conversation and set you free, because I know you've got other things to do. But given your experience of spending the amount of time that you did, a decade at INEC, and being an objective person now, I mean, you don't owe INEC anything necessarily. Is it your sense that this poll has been generally compliant?
Yeah, it's normally compliant. It's been generally compliant, except for a few areas, and those areas where materials were not delivered on time. Certainly there will be lapses. There will not be enough time for people to actually complete voting before maybe the government get agitated to leave the areas. So for me, those areas that were peaceful and compliant are plenty, are many. We always get to hear problems from the fewer areas that had problems, but those areas that have problems may not necessarily comply as best as what we had in the good areas. And I'm hoping for a day that every time we go out for elections, it will be like a textbook, like what was written in the textbook. You tend to find that a lot of discrepancies, people take the instructions differently. You have to, even my polling unit, I had to correct the ad hoc staff because they were taking the instructions upside down. So basically, and this is because we change our ad hoc staff every 4 years. If only we can have a system where we have people that have done election over and over again, you'll find that within the next 3-4 cycles, there will be textbook type of election. Like in Ghana, they actually employ them from presiding officer, you grow to the next level. But in Nigeria, every time, everybody is new. You hardly find people that have conducted like 3 elections consecutively. Maybe they would have conducted an election as a student, then as a copper, and that's the end of it. So I think we need to remove that suspicious nature and begin to groom and train people that will be our election officials until we get it to a point that you have textbook kind of elections. We've seen textbook elections in certain countries where every polling unit behaved the same way because they've had training over and over again, and they've been ad hoc staff over and over again. So I think that's my take on this.
That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. I would thank you so much for sparing us this moment. Amina Zakari, a former INEC National Commissioner, and of course our very own analyst, Dr. Constance Ikoku, for being with us on this segment.
And you're watching a special coverage of Nigeria's 2023 presidential election here on Arise News with Adesua Omorwan and me, Charles Anyegolo. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back in a hot second. Stay with us.
Yeah, before we go to our correspondence, I just wanted to take it back to our team here, our guest here in the studio. Let's look at this matter of arrival and
conditions laid out.
And don't let us deceive ourselves. 2023. We have a choice. 2023. We have a choice. It's whether we make the right choice or we ignore making the right choice. And if we don't make the right choice, we don't blame anybody. We blame ourselves. If we make the right choice, we will overcome the twin challenge of poverty and insecurity. We have a choice. We have a choice. We have a choice between challenge of poverty and insecurity, which are symbiotic, Insecurity feeds on poverty. Poverty feeds on insecurity. And don't let anybody deceive you about that. And if we do not take the right step and make the right choice, not only will the
talking about these kind of things, what Kade was doing was that he was saying, look, let's theorize about this. Let's just put it and let's look at the bare bones. And you find that
and sometimes they do these things too, so that you know, they are not subjected to abuse, because you make it so easy. Your political opponents could take advantage of it.
So you know, there are points on both sides of the debate. But I think the point that we're putting across here is that this is not the end of democracy. Voting is not the end of democracy.
Certainly not.
It's part of the process. And the much more important part, once the person
stands out for me, is that we all thought that these elections were going to be heavily militarized. Of course, quite a number of people who heard that I was going to the southeast to cover the elections, especially in Anambra and Imo State, said, well, that place is volatile. Well, we wish all the best, but please be careful. But that's not been the case today. As a matter of fact, apart from the time when the EFCC came here with heavily armed police officers to the polling units of the presidential candidates, the only policemen or security officers that you could see around Agulu were those attached to the presidential candidates. There were no joint patrols, no military, no DSS, and yet the process went free. The process went heavily peacefully. The thought that stands out for me is that a lot of polling units in Anambra State experienced late delivery of voting materials. Now, when we probed that, a lot of people blamed INEC. They say, for instance, that in most wards, there was just one bus to convey voting materials and the personnel. And so you find out that a bus takes 1 or 2 polling units, goes to drop them, comes back, and that same process goes on. And so you find out that some people started voting very early and some started voting very late. In fact, the governor of this state, Chukwumax Charles Soludo, voted in the late afternoon because voting materials didn't get to his polling unit on time. So these are some of the issues that we've experienced here in Anambra State. But the process has been very, very peaceful. The environment is calm. We've not heard of any skirmishes here in Anambra State, Chamberlain.
Well, Vele, you know, the state was in the news for different reasons in the build-up to this day, right from part of what you mentioned, the comment that came through from the governor, some risk analysis, which did say watch out for that state, and then security concerns as well. But at the moment, do you get any impression, any information whatsoever? Is there voting going on anywhere else from what you know, from where you are, or having come through from Agulu to Onitsha at the moment?
Yeah, there are some polling units across the state where voting started very late. And you know, the Electoral Act says any polling unit that INEC officials get late, everybody there must be allowed to vote. In fact, there are some places around Ubusi where we hear that the ad hoc staff had to go and get generators because they started with torchlights. But of course, that wasn't being effective. They had to go to get generators so that the process can continue because a lot of people are insisting that they must vote. There's also quite a large voter turnout in these parts. So yes, some people are still voting right now. And in some cases, they've just started collating. While, of course, in Agulu, in the polling units where I was, sorting started early 3 p.m. Because, of course, at about 10 a.m., of course, the INEC officials were on ground already.
All right. Thank you very much indeed, correspondent Dele Omayeni, covering the presidential candidate of the Labour Party. Well, when we speak about security, I mean, getting up this morning and moving around, you get different reports, correspondents in all parts of the country, getting feedback and information almost on the go. One of such was Kogi State, not too far from here in Abuja, where several reports did come through about some activity from the state concerning some local government areas, senatorial districts. And now if you look at some scenario coming through from the senatorial candidate of the PDP, Natasha Akpoti, now this was one of the scenes that played where voting was supposed to happen. And if I remember, if I get that right, that I think there was a response from the government saying that they had to send people for excavation purposes. We'll just need to get some clarity on that one at the moment. So if we do have Natasha Akpoti, she is on the ballot. So she wasn't exactly happy concerning what played out. So do we have her? Let's just get to hear from her concerning what transpired in her locality. Good evening, Natasha. Can you hear us today?
I can hear you, Chamberlain. Good evening. Good evening, Nigerians.
We did see some visuals, images circulating about you, narrating what transpired. So tell us, what happened? Okay, so it's just coming in frozen at the moment, but we will sort that out and bring her response to you. We'll get a response from all of those who are in the field in whatever way possible. So just keep it. We'll sort that out and get her back on. And I also do remember that one of the pressers with the EFCC, I beg your pardon, with the INEC chair, some CSOs had. Okay, well, there you go. That is, I believe, some of these scenarios that happened earlier in the day today. So we'll get her back and ensure that she gives us her account of what transpired. Well, there was that call, that concern, when they did ask the INEC chair and security agencies, particularly the IGP, protect the few number. I think the number dropped for females on the ballot. We'll come to that. I wonder why that is the case, but we do have her back. Natasha Akpoti, she's back on the line. So please go ahead and tell us what transpired today for you.
Well, it started quite peacefully, and then there about 12 o'clock, we experienced a lot of attacks from the APC thugs. They carried machetes, guns. Those that carried guns, they wore military uniform, but you can tell that they were not the genuine military. And then they collected ballot papers, seized the beavers, destroyed a lot, and at a point they even tried to abduct an INEC official from a polling near me. So in total, in my local government, that is Okene local government and Okene local government, hundreds of polling units have been destroyed because pretty much we are leading everywhere. Everywhere we were leading. And then wherever they found that we were leading extremely, they had to destroy the ballot boxes. So what happened is, at some instance, the soldiers moved swiftly and like all these gentlemen there and intercepted them, requesting for their identification cards, you know, to show that they are actually members of the force. And to their surprise, they had none. So all these men you are seeing on the floor, there are actually about 30 of them that were arrested. So they can you hear me, sorry? There are about 30 of them arrested. Only 8 are being displayed there because they were arrested in batches and they were moved to the Lokoja command. They were fake policemen. They were all fake policemen wearing the military uniform, carrying guns, machine guns, and they were the ones terrorizing voters. Now, I can tell you that now, I already made a complaint to INEC that hundreds of polling units were destroyed across the local government. In addition, the Ganaja axis of Ajakuta local government never voted. Many polling units there, polling units that have thousands of voters, of registered voters, were disenfranchised because the INEC officials was not on site, and the EOs switched off their phones. We could not reach the EOs, and so no material. So there was no voting in Ganaja axis. Petitions have been written. The polling unit agents wrote petitions in that regard, and we are hoping that INEC will allow elections to be conducted in these places because it is extremely wrong to disenfranchise thousands of people. I mean, you should have seen the mood earlier on in the day. People came out in their thousands. It was so peaceful. People were organized. Everything was coordinated until this mishap started around 12 o'clock. So that's the situation now. Also, have been some deaths. We saw instances where there's some thugs in uniforms tried to shoot at the police officers, and then there was a retaliation of force. And then, unfortunately, we have some of our what's it called, constituents dead. Some people lost their lives today because it was their lives. So there was exchange of fire of gunshots.
That's really disheartening.
Oh,
to
and
hear.
one more thing.
But I don't know if you can confirm to us, Natasha, if you can hear me, about there were reports that initially some areas were dug up around your local government. Can you hear me?
One into my community, the Yabelo tribe by the Nigerian army, and they told Yahya Bello not to, he had no right to leave his local government and enter another local government. He was driving into my community and he was stopped. And I believe at that point, your channel's reporter, in conjunction with TVC, because they were together, they tried to get a coverage of it because it was a scene. The governor stepped out of his car, challenging the forces that he needed to drive to my community. And they were like, no, you have to stay back at yours, sir. We understand you're a governor, but you cannot cross the local government borders. And he wasn't happy about that, but they successfully sent him away. Your reporter was on ground. I don't know if he sent you the visuals.
Okay, that's certainly something to note, and we'll certainly look out for that. But I wanted to confirm, yes. I mean, there were stories that made the round earlier today that trenches were dug up around your local government area, making it difficult for INEC officials to access. Can you confirm that story to us?
Yes, 5 roads leading to my community were cut off. The excavation started 2 days ago. Hold a second. I'm on the phone. Stop calling me. I'm on the phone. But stop calling me. I'm on the phone. So sorry about that. We're driving to the collation center. So, but you have to cut, please. Let me finish up. Yes, the exercise started about 3 nights ago. We woke up to realize 3 roads were excavated, and then they continued the next day. So I tell you, that was purposely to disenfranchise us and to prevent INEC from exercising a free and fair election. And the hardship, even though the governor issued a statement that his